Growing up, my sister Stephanie was the undeniable star of the family, basking in attention while I faded into the background. As a kid, I convinced myself it was normal. Maybe she just needed more care, or maybe I was just naturally independent. But as we got older, the favoritism became impossible to ignore. Every minor achievement of hers was treated like a world-changing event. Got an A on a test? Let's have a family dinner. Landed a summer job at a cafe? Let's buy you something nice, sweetheart. Meanwhile, my hard-earned successes were brushed aside like afterthoughts. When I secured a full-ride scholarship to college, I got a distracted, "That's great, honey," before the conversation pivoted right back to Stephanie's weekend plans. When I landed a job in my field right after graduation, silence. It wasn't even acknowledged. I kept hoping things would change as we got older, but instead, they only got worse. Which brings me to last weekend. My parents reached out a few days prior, something they rarely did unless it was about Stephanie. My mother's voice was unusually warm. "We're having a small family celebration this Saturday. It would mean a lot if you could come." That alone should have been a red flag. But like an idiot, I let myself believe, just for a second, that maybe, just maybe, this time was different, that they actually wanted me there. So I said yes. When I arrived, I instantly knew I'd made a mistake. The restaurant was packed. Extended family, aunts, uncles, cousins. Everyone gathered around an elaborately decorated table, the kind of setup I had never once had for any milestone in my life. My stomach twisted, but the final gut punch came when I saw the banner. "Congratulations, Stephanie." Of course. I forced a smile, swallowing the bitterness rising in my throat, and made my way to the table. That's when Stephanie turned, flashing me a smirk. "Oh," she said, her voice carrying loud enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't know you were coming." Mom shot me an awkward glance, but said nothing. Stephanie just laughed, shrugging. "I mean, this is a family thing." She gestured to the table. Every seat was filled. I stood there, gripping the back of an occupied chair. No seat for me. I turned to my mother, my voice sharp. "You didn't even save me a seat?" She shifted uncomfortably. My father predictably stayed silent. We weren't sure if you'd come," Mom mumbled. Stephanie snorted. "Yeah, you never show up for family stuff." "Oh, you mean all the ones I was never invited to?" I took a slow breath, forcing my expression into something neutral. "So, what are we celebrating?" Stephanie beamed, practically glowing with self-satisfaction. "I got promoted." I blinked. "Didn't you just start that job like 2 months ago?" "Yep, and now I'm an assistant manager." I nearly laughed. That's it? I had worked my ass off for years, secured a degree, built a career, and barely got a passing nod. But Stephanie lands an entry-level promotion after 2 months, and suddenly she's worthy of a full-on family event. I should have been angry. I should have flipped the table, screamed, asked them why I was never enough. But instead, I just nodded. I get it. Then, without another word, I turned and walked out. I drove home in silence, waiting for the inevitable texts, some acknowledgement, something. But my phone remained dark. Not a single message. Not even a casual, "Where'd you go?" The next morning, a sharp knock at my door broke the quiet. I opened it to see my parents standing there, looking uncomfortable. My mother wrung her hands, my father looking tired, like this conversation was already exhausting him. "We need to talk," Mom sighed. I leaned against the doorframe, crossing my arms. "Talk about what?" Mom exhaled, long and dramatic, like I was the difficult one. "Can we come in?" I didn't budge. "Depends. What do you need to talk about?" For the first time, my father spoke, rubbing his temples. "Look, we need a favor." A favor. Now they needed me. I should have slammed the door in their faces, but curiosity got the best of me. So, against my better judgment, I stepped aside. Fine, let's hear it. They walked into my living room like they owned the place, my mother settling onto the couch with a practiced sigh, smoothing her blouse like she was bracing for a battle, while my father remained standing, shuffling awkwardly. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed. All right, what is it this time? Mom forced a tight smile, the kind she used when trying to soften a blow she knew wouldn't land well. I raised a brow, thinking back to last night. Maybe they felt bad. Maybe they'd come to apologize. We need you to cover the dinner bill, she said. I blinked. What? She sighed, as if I were the one being slow. The bill was a bit higher than expected. My stomach dropped. Then rage took its place. I stared at them, waiting for the punchline. They can't be serious. You want me to pay for it? Dad nodded, shifting uncomfortably. You've got some savings, right? I mean, you're doing well for yourself. I laughed, short and sharp. Unbelievable. Mom, however, wasn't joking. She straightened her posture, her voice sickeningly reasonable. Stephanie's promotion was a big deal. We wanted to celebrate properly, but the bill got a little out of hand. We figured since you didn't contribute in any other way, you could at least help out financially. I nearly felt lightheaded. They didn't even save me a seat, and now they expect me to foot the bill? Mom rolled her eyes. Don't be dramatic. I let out a hollow laugh. Dramatic? I gestured wildly. You ignored me all night, treated me like an outsider, and now you have the audacity to show up at my house demanding money? Dad cleared his throat, trying to sound reasonable. Look, we're not asking for the whole thing, just a few hundred. My jaw clenched. How much was the bill? Mom hesitated. $1,200. I nearly choked. $1,200. She had the nerve to look sheepish. Well, we did order a few premium drinks, and your uncle. I cut her off. And why, exactly, is that my problem? Mom let out another exasperated sigh, like I was the one being unreasonable. Stephanie makes less than you, and we covered most of her college expenses. We thought it was only fair if you pitched in this once. Something inside me snapped. Oh, I see. You paid for her education, but not mine. And now, because I actually worked my ass off to build a career, you think that entitles you to my money? Mom pressed her lips together, clearly annoyed. We're family. I let out another bitter laugh. We're not. Because real family doesn't treat someone like an afterthought until they need something. Dad sighed heavily. Please be reasonable. We know you have savings. I tilted my head, suddenly cold. And how exactly do you know that? They didn't answer. Oh. I let out a slow breath, fury burning under my skin. You went through my finances, didn't you? Mom shook her head quickly. Of course not. Well, your aunt mentioned you got a bonus recently and we thought, stop. I held up a hand. Just stop. They had the audacity to look offended. Mom switched tactics. Look, sweetheart, we love you, but you need to stop holding grudges. Last night was just a misunderstanding. I fixed her with a glare. A misunderstanding? You purposely didn't save me a seat. Stephanie mocked me, and no one even bothered to check on me when I left. But now that you need money, suddenly I matter? Silence. I shook my head. You know what? I'm not paying a damn thing. Mom's face darkened. Don't be selfish, I scoffed. Oh, you want to talk about selfishness? Let's go there. I crossed my arms, my voice like ice. Selfish is throwing a huge dinner to celebrate Stephanie's promotion, while never once acknowledging anything I've accomplished. Selfish is expecting me to pay for a party I wasn't even welcome at. Selfish is only showing up at my door when you need something. Mom's jaw tightened. We have acknowledged your achievements. I let out a humorless laugh. Oh, really? Name one time. She opened her mouth, closed it. A flicker of frustration crossed her face. That's what I thought. You never celebrated me. Not when I got into college, without any help from you. Not when I graduated. Not when I landed my first major job. But the moment Stephanie gets any success, it's a damn festival. Dad groaned, rubbing his temples as if I was exhausting him. Stephanie needed more help, Mom insisted, her voice laced with exasperation. Why? I shot back, arms crossed. Because she's your favorite? Mom gasped as if the accusation was too outrageous to consider. That's not true. I arched a brow. Really? Then explain why you paid for her college while leaving me to figure it out alone. Mom hesitated, her lips pressing into a thin line. You were always more independent. I let out a sharp scoff. That's not an excuse. You made me independent by giving me no other choice. Meanwhile, Stephanie gets everything handed to her, and I'm just supposed to accept it. Dad stepped forward, his tone firm, like he was trying to reassert control. This isn't about the past. We need help with this bill, and you can afford it. I took a steady breath, rage simmering just beneath my skin. Let's be clear. You didn't really invite me. You didn't save me a seat. You didn't even call when I left. And now you're at my door, acting like none of that happened, asking for my money. Mom folded her arms. We didn't expect the bill to be so high. I rolled my eyes. Then maybe you should have ordered less, she huffed. Stop being petty. You know we would do the same for you. I let out a humorless laugh. That's funny because you haven't. Not once. When I was struggling in college, did you ever offer to help with my rent? When I was living off instant noodles for a week, did you check if I was okay? But when Stephanie wants a fancy dinner, suddenly the budget doesn't matter. Dad's face darkened. We're your parents. You owe us respect. That word ignited something inside me. I straightened, my voice even but cold. I don't owe you anything. Respect is earned, and after last night, you lost what little I had left for you. For the first time, Mom looked genuinely taken aback, like it had never occurred to her that I might say no. Dad let out a frustrated sigh. Fine. If you won't help, we'll figure it out ourselves. Yeah, I said coolly. You will. Mom's expression hardened. Don't expect us to be there when you need something. A bitter laugh slipped past my lips. You were never there anyway. She flinched. I walked to the door, pulling it open. You can see yourselves out. They hesitated, like they wanted to say more, but I just stood there, waiting. Finally, Mom let out a sharp breath, storming past me. Dad followed without another word. I shut the door behind them, locked it. Then I exhaled, but the anger still burned beneath my skin. Something told me this wasn't over. The next morning, my phone exploded with messages. Mom, you embarrassed us. Do you even care about your family, Dad? This is not how you treat the people who raised you, Stephanie. Wow. You seriously couldn't spare a few hundred? Pathetic. Mom, again. Your aunt and uncle are shocked by your behavior. So are we. I stared at my screen, barely able to process the audacity. They weren't upset at themselves for what they'd done. They weren't sorry. No, they were mad at me, because I refused to be their personal ATM. I wasn't in the mood for this. I switched my phone to silent, got up, and made myself a coffee. The warmth of the mug grounded me, but the anger still simmered. They had never supported me, never celebrated me, never cared when I was struggling, and I was done pretending they ever would. I should have seen it coming. This wasn't the first time they had pulled something like this, but it was definitely the worst. Growing up, everything revolved around Stephanie. When she got an A on a test, it was a cause for celebration. When I got straight A's, it was barely acknowledged. When she made the soccer team, she was rewarded with new gear and a family dinner. When I got accepted into an elite academic program, all I got was a quick, "That's nice," before the conversation moved on. But the ultimate betrayal came in college. They had promised for years to help with tuition, but when the time came, there were suddenly unexpected financial struggles. Struggles that somehow didn't exist when Stephanie needed her expenses covered in full. "She needs more help," they said. "You'll figure it out." Well, I did figure it out. I worked my ass off, juggled multiple jobs, and clawed my way to a stable, successful career. And now that I finally had savings, they suddenly saw me as nothing more than a walking ATM. I was halfway through my coffee when my phone started buzzing again. This time, a call. Mom. I debated ignoring it, but some part of me wanted to hear what ridiculous excuse she'd throw at me next. I sighed and answered. "What?" She didn't even acknowledge my tone. "This needs to be fixed." I let out a sharp laugh. "Oh? And what exactly needs fixing?" "You've upset the entire family," she said, her voice dripping with self-righteousness. "We had to pay the bill ourselves. That wasn't easy for us." I leaned against the counter. "Sounds like a you problem," she scoffed. "We were counting on you. You have the money, but you just let us struggle instead." "Oh no," I said flatly. "You mean you actually had to take responsibility for your own decisions? That must have been awful for you." "Don't be a brat," she snapped. "Your aunt and uncle think you were incredibly rude. You should apologize." I nearly choked on my coffee. "Apologize?" "Yes," she said without hesitation, "for storming out, causing a scene, and refusing to help your own family." I was almost impressed by how deep her delusions ran. "Let me get this straight," I said, keeping my voice even. "You invited me to a celebration, didn't save me a seat, made it clear I wasn't considered immediate family, ignored me when I left, then expected me to pay for everyone's dinner. And I'm the problem?" She sighed, the "oh, you're being unreasonable" sigh I had heard my whole life. "You're twisting things." "No," I said, voice sharp. "I'm finally calling you out, and honestly, I should have done it years ago." Silence. Then, in a low, warning tone, she said, "You're making a mistake. You don't want to push us away." I smiled, cold, unforgiving. "You already did that all on your own." Then I hung up. The second the call ended, my hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the sheer adrenaline of finally standing my ground. No backing down, no second-guessing myself. And for the first time in my life, it felt good. But something told me they weren't finished. The next morning, I woke up groggy, still replaying the conversation in my head. I reached for my phone, and instantly, the sleepiness vanished. My lock screen was flooded with notifications, missed calls, texts, social media alerts. A sinking feeling formed in my gut. I unlocked my phone, and there it was, a public social media post from my mother. It started off deceptively soft, the kind of heartbroken mother nonsense that manipulative parents love to spin. It pains me to write this, but sometimes, as parents, we have to face the heartbreaking truth that no matter how much love we give, some children will turn their backs on family. My jaw clenched as I kept reading. Last night, We celebrated a huge milestone for our daughter, Stephanie. It was supposed to be a joyful occasion, a time for family to come together and support one another. But unfortunately, not everyone could share in our happiness. I already knew where this was going. Our other daughter, let's call her X, showed up uninvited, made a huge scene, and stormed out when she realized the world didn't revolve around her. I stared at the screen, my grip tightening around the phone. So this was their next move: rewrite history, paint me as the villain, and make sure the whole family, and anyone else gullible enough to believe them, would see it. But what they didn't realize? I was done playing their game. I reread the post, my jaw tightening as each line sunk in. Heartless, ungrateful, selfish. My own mother had turned me into a villain, twisting reality into a pitiful sob story for sympathy points. This wasn't just some passive-aggressive guilt trip. It was a calculated attack, a full-scale character assassination. My fingers trembled as I scrolled through the comments, already knowing what I'd find. Hundreds of replies, all blindly eating up her lies. I can't believe X would do this, after everything you've done for her. Some people don't deserve good parents. You raised her better than this. And then, of course, Stephanie had to chime in. She's always been like this. It's only getting worse. I feel so bad for Mom and Dad. I clenched my teeth. Typical. Stephanie had always been the golden child, the untouchable one, and now she had proof that I was the problem, that I was the selfish one. And the worst part? People believed it. I checked my private messages, already bracing myself. Wow, I didn't expect this from you. That's so cold. You should be ashamed. How could you do this to your own parents? People I hadn't spoken to in years were suddenly crawling out of the woodwork to pass judgment, armed with nothing but a one-sided, carefully crafted story. I gripped my phone, my pulse pounding. I wanted to scream, to expose everything, the favoritism, the neglect, the years of being cast aside. But I knew how this worked. No matter what I said, they would twist it. If I lashed out, I was bitter and hostile. If I tried to defend myself, I was dramatic and petty. Number I wouldn't play their game. I took a slow breath, forcing my emotions into focus. This wasn't just a petty family squabble anymore. This was an attack on my character, and I had a choice: sit back and let them destroy my reputation or fight back on my own terms. I put down my phone and exhaled, my mind already mapping out my next move. Did they want to play dirty? They had no idea who they were dealing with. A few minutes later, I opened my laptop, typed out a post, and hit publish. Since my family has chosen to publicly lie about me, I think it's only fair to set the record straight. I wasn't going to say anything, but after waking up to dozens of texts accusing me of being selfish, I've come to a realization. I'm done protecting people who would rather throw me under the bus than take responsibility for their own actions. So let's talk about what really happened. I was invited to my sister's party under the impression that I was actually wanted there. But when I arrived, there wasn't even a seat for me. My sister, the one who has been treated like royalty despite doing the bare minimum, made it clear that I wasn't considered immediate family. So I left. No yelling, no scene. I just walked away. Hours later, my parents showed up at my door, not to apologize, not to explain, but to ask me to pay their bill. That's right. The same people who didn't think I was important enough to sit at their table suddenly thought I should foot the entire dinner tab. And when I refused, suddenly, I was the villain, the ungrateful child, the selfish monster who turned her back on her poor, loving family. Let's be clear. I didn't make this a big deal. They did. I didn't put money above family. They did when they tried to use me like an ATM. And now, instead of owning up to their behavior, they've taken to publicly smearing my name to cover their tracks. But here's the thing. I don't care anymore. I've spent years chasing their approval, years working hard, achieving more than they ever bothered to acknowledge, while my sister was celebrated for every tiny accomplishment. I let it go when they dismissed my feelings. I swallowed it when they prioritized her, time and time again. But this was the last straw. So let me be perfectly clear. I hit post, and I waited. I was done. Not just with their games, their manipulation, or their endless guilt trips. I was done with them. I didn't need an apology. I didn't want a forced, half-hearted attempt at reconciliation. I didn't care to hash things out with people who saw me as nothing more than a financial safety net and an emotional punching bag. They were no longer my problem, and before anyone dares to say, but they're your family. No, family doesn't treat you like this. Family doesn't push you aside until they need something. Family doesn't celebrate your existence only when it benefits them. I read over my post one last time, making sure every word was sharp, deliberate, and final. No lingering hesitation, no emotion that could be twisted against me. Just the truth. I hit post. And then, everything exploded. People who had known my family for years started reaching out, some privately, some in the comments, saying they weren't surprised. Some even shared their own stories, recalling the blatant favoritism, the entitlement, the way my parents had always placed Stephanie on a pedestal while treating me like an afterthought. My sister, true to form, tried to play the victim, calling me dramatic and ungrateful. But it was too late. The truth was out, and no amount of gaslighting could shove it back into the shadows. As for my parents, silence, no apologies, no desperate attempts to salvage their image, just nothing. And honestly, I didn't care. Cutting them off was the easiest, most liberating decision I had ever made. For the first time in my life, I wasn't walking on eggshells, trying to be good enough for people who never respected me. So, what do you think? Was I too harsh? Or was this justice long overdue? Let me know.